This is the GoPro Hero 8 Black, and this is the DJI Osmo Action. These are two action cameras that we are going to be looking at in comparison to each other. What's up everybody, my name is Joey Famelli. I'm a video producer here at Tested, and I'll be taking a look at these two cameras. DJI actually sent us both these cameras late last year. They sent us their Osmo Action, but they also purchased and sent us a GoPro Hero 8. So full disclaimer there. I'm sharing that information with you because I think that's an important part of this narrative. That tells me that DJI is very confident in their camera. They're very confident that it is as good as or better than the GoPro. We will see. We will give you our opinion about that at the end of this video, but let's jump right into this. Now, everything shot with these action cameras will be kind of as is. I won't do any full color touch-ups, and I won't adjust any of the audio when I get to the audio testing. And this review video is being published at 1080. So everything will be set to that frame size. I might do some scaling adjustments here and there, but I'm not going to degrade the quality by upscaling anything. Everything will basically be scaled down. I shot most of the stuff at 2.7K 60. That just seemed like a reasonable frame size for me, or resolution size. But these cameras are fully 4K capable and can do 4K 60. But I tend to use 2.7K because a lot of my stuff is published in 1080. So there's a lot to cover with these two cameras. I mean, there's a lot to cover just with one of these cameras. There's a lot of functionality built into these. But I think the big thing that people are gonna be wanting to know, or not wanting to know, but making this decision based off of, is the just overall image quality of it. The image that the cameras just process and push out to you. So let's talk a little bit about that. These are tiny sensors on wide angle lenses, and so each is using a little bit of processing power to add some sharpness and clarity, and it differs based off like how much detail is in the shot. Sometimes you'll get some gnarly looking aliasing when you have too much detail in certain things like trees, where the camera's trying to resolve that. But really when it comes down to like clarity and crispness, it's kind of how each of these resolve that sharpness. And they're pretty comparable. I think the DJI at times can look a little more aliased in the trees, but it's barely noticeable. The other big part, I think actually the most important part that is going to be a big decision maker for people is the color treatment that comes out of these cameras. You'll notice that the GoPro just loves orange. It loves orange, it loves vibrancy, it loves high saturation. There's a bit of an S-curve happening with the contrast. You're seeing a relatively graded image. I'd call this like the GoPro look. This is the very tan, very orange skin tones, very bright orangey highlights, and like sunsets and like bright green grass and blues. It's a little bit too much in my opinion, but most people will enjoy this image. And if you do, then it's all ready for you to come out of the box. The DJI, on the other hand, you'll notice looks much flatter. It's not particularly a flat image, what I'd call a flat image, but it's more subdued. The saturation's dialed way back, the vibrancy. There's a little bit less of an S-curve. It's not as aggressive. It's an image that you'd want to work with in post, or I'd want to work with in post. If I was to have each of these images, I'd prefer the DJI if I was going to be matching this with other cameras. If it was an action cam accompanied by other cameras, I'd want this because this is a better starting point for me to push and pull the image. Whereas the GoPro, I'd be pulling the image kind of back from its grade and then moving it to where I need it to be, if that all makes sense. And you don't want to do that too much because these are highly compressed codecs and formats, and images will start breaking apart and start looking a little ugly. And so having a starting point that's less treated is my preference as a professional. Now, that all being said, I don't actually see too much of a difference in the color renditions. I know the color looks very differently, but how each camera interprets its blues, its reds, its greens, that data, how it interprets those is pretty similar. If I start bumping up the saturation on the DJI, I will start to get closer to the GoPro. The GoPro still has a little bit more warmer highlights than the DJI, and the DJI probably has a little bit warmer shadows and midtones, but it's relatively close in color renditions. So at this point during the video, you might be asking yourself, why do I care about any of this? All I want is to bungee jump off of Machu Picchu and I need an action camera to do so. The GoPro will then be your camera for that. It's a great camera for out of the box image that looks nice. Now, if you do want something from the GoPro that is not treated, there are log formats in both of these cameras. GoPro has what's called ProTune, and the DJI Osmo Action has what's called D-Cinelike. And what that does is it brings everything down to a flat profile. I love working in these formats normally. The GH5 that I shoot on here, I usually always shoot in Vlog, which is their log format. And every camera kind of nowadays has their own log format. And the versatility on those formats kind of depend on how much data is being recorded to the card. The GH5 has a lot of data. It's a 422 image, 10-bit, and I can push and pull those colors and contrast all over the place without the image degrading. In the past, I've shied away from using log formats in cameras that provide less data because you almost immediately start to get degradation. Now, there's a lot of people who have been using these log formats and have been getting great results and great color and great looking images. I haven't in the past, so I tended to not really use it. I shot very little with this in the ProTune and the D-Cinelike, just to test out the LUTs and just to see how the color went. And it seems fine. And I think if you wanted to kind of control your GoPro more and you were confident in your color grading ability, then that ProTune is certainly an option to try out. Just know that you can't go too crazy with your color grading and your color matching. Now, I think my favorite innovations with action cameras over the years is the stabilization. Both of these cameras have digital stabilization, which means that they're using a little bit more of the sensor, a little bit more of the image, and reconfiguring the image to give it a smoother, stabilized look when you're doing things like running or biking or jogging. GoPro uses what's called the Hypersmooth function, and DJI uses what they call Rock Steady. Both of these work and look fantastic. I think the DJI might have a little bit more sway, but it's barely noticeable. Here you can see examples of me running with the cameras. Now, let's just start off here. This is both cameras with the modes turned off. I'm just holding the camera, and you can see it's relatively rough. There's a lot of shake, a lot of movement that you would expect as you're running with the camera in your hand. Now, I'm gonna turn both of these modes on. Now you can see me running. Things are much more smooth, much more pleasing. You can see how this would be great for like things like snowboarding or skiing, or maybe some water sports, where it really just keeps the subject centered in frame and not all shaky and going crazy. So this whole part might sound a little bit petty, but usability and just design is kind of important for me with these cameras. I don't like their bodies and functionality working against me. So let's talk a little bit about what I like and dislike, because it's actually kind of funny. Both of these cameras have so much that I dislike about the design and I like, and I wish I can get some kind of amalgamation of the both, just combined to give me my perfect camera. But let's talk about the GoPro. The GoPro, I love this new, just fully enclosed body. There's no cages. It's just there. It's waterproof with everything locked in. It's waterproof. It has these mounting points that fold down. Now, even though I'm kind of done with this whole like weird little screw, plasticky mounting option, I don't know of any other alternative options for these, but I'm a little bit tired of them. Whatever. This is the best version of that, where it actually just folds down. You don't have to deal with like finding the cage and finding the piece. You just fold down and click it in, or fold it up and tape it or butyl to some kind of surface. The micro SD card, look, another thing I'm done with is micro SD cards. I'm ready for these cameras to have full SDs. I'll take the extra grams and weight. I'm so tired of micro SDs. Anyway, the GoPro has this micro SD card slammed right against the battery. It's almost impossible for me to get out with my fat fingers with the battery in place. So every time that I have to get the card out, I usually have to take the battery out, which is a small nitpick, but it's just a pain. I want this stuff to be a little bit easier. The screen and the UI feels a little bit dated. I like DJI. I'll get the DJIs in a minute, but I like their version of this better. This feels a little bit antiquated, a little bit clunky, and sometimes I just get lost in the menus trying to figure out what I'm trying to do. I love the presets that it lets you set up presets and access those very quickly. That's awesome. It does only have the rear screen, with much more of a bevel than the DJI, which I'm not a huge fan of. But yeah, rear screen. You can only see kind of behind. You can only see what the camera is seeing from behind. There's an attachment you can buy that gives you a front-facing camera. I'm not sure how important that is to you or me or anybody really. I mean, let's talk about what front-facing cameras are really for, and that's like vloggers for the most part. There's benefits to having a front-facing screen when you're trying to mount this thing to a car and a dashboard and you really want to just see what's in front of you. But let's talk a little bit about vlogging with these cameras in general. So this test here is for these cameras of like a vlogging camera. Now I know these cameras aren't going to be used for like any kind of full-time vlogging for any vloggers, but these cameras might be used for like supplemental purposes. Cameras just to bring in spaces where larger cameras can't go. Right now I'm going to turn this rig around, and now I'm on the DJI. And with the DJI I can actually see myself in the front-facing camera, which the GoPro doesn't have. So I can frame up myself in the way I want, which is good, but also these cameras are such wide-angle lenses that it's not going to be too much of an issue to get yourself in frame. I can turn this back around to the GoPro and assure myself that I'm in frame, even though I can't see myself, because I know that these things are wide as heck and it's only 2.5, 3 feet away from me. which the front-facing camera is usually for, is when you want to film yourself. So I don't think there's any real danger in not having the front-facing screen. I guess it is nice. Going back to the DJI, you know, it is a nice little extra feature, but I don't think it's imperative to have, especially if you're doing any kind of vlogging, talking to the camera. Both of these cameras have internal microphones with their own version of, I guess, wind suppression. I shot a little test using the wind suppression here. All right, check 1, 2. This is me speaking into both the GoPro and the DJI with wind reduction on. It is a little windy. I'm riding a bike, so it's a little breezy on the mics, so we'll see how this holds up. And now I'm going to switch over to both wind reduction off. Okay, so equally as windy, but now with both wind reductions turned off on the Osmo Action and the GoPro. Probably sound pretty muffled and windy on the mic. Both the GoPro and the DJI with wind reduction, but now with both wind reductions turned off on the Osmo Action and the GoPro. And again, I really like the UI that DJI is going with. It just feels snappy. It feels solid. It's very simple. It's quick. Everything's very large for my eyes to see and my big fingers to touch. And the going from front screen to back screen is pretty nice. Just 2 taps with 3 fingers. Pretty easy to use. We're back to cages. This feels old. This feels antiquated at this point. I don't like how I have to deal with this plastic cage. It uses the same GoPro mounting system, which is nice. If you already have those mounts, you can throw those into the mix and use those for DJI stuff. But like just the cages in general, I mean, you end up with just so much, and especially those who have used multiple GoPro iterations know that like you get cases for one version that doesn't work with the next version, and then now you just have an obsolete case. It's kind of a pain, and I don't like that they went this route. I really wish they stuck with the what GoPro was trying to do, and just creating the single body. And then if you want some kind of protective cage, or if they're, I think cages should be an accessory, not something kind of mandatory for mounting. What else? The lenses. So the lenses. The GoPro at this point went full just built-in lens. You cannot, if you scratch this thing, it's stuck in there. You cannot replace it. There might be some, like, I think there are protective layers you can get to attach onto it. The DJI actually has this like removable glass piece on the edge, a little filter that you can trade out. And this might be important for you if you want certain color filters, if you're doing some underwater stuff, or you're trying to do some stylistic stuff. NDs, if you're wanting to control your shutter, control everything, an ND will help cut down that light. And this is actually great for me. I love this idea, and I hope they continue going on with this route and keep it relatively standardized, so you don't have to keep buying new sets of filters for iterations of these cameras. As far as light goes, I have noticed in a little bit of my tests where light sources are on camera shining towards the light, that the flare-ups on each of these cameras are very different. Now, if you look here, you'll see that the light leaking on the GoPro is very, it's got this kind of crazy line that just runs through it. And I've seen this on like cheaper plastic lenses, or, I mean, I don't want to say cheap, but like there are certain lenses that just kind of have this effect. And to me, it looks cheap, and it immediately screams like video or just cheap plastic. The DJI actually blooms out in a way that's a little bit more indicative of like more professional lenses. Not a huge thing for most people, unless like, you know, if you don't mind that, that's fine. I definitely do mind that. It's not a look I like to go for. So usually in the past when I've shot with GoPros, or some of DJI's older cameras do that too, I just tend to avoid lights on set. And for me, I like lights in shots to add contrast here and there. So I do like a little bit of flare. And if I do, I would prefer the DJI look rather than that kind of crazy, kind of bleed out. Now, both cameras have Wi-Fi and apps to control them. I've used both of these. I think they're both great. They are both work fantastic. And if you've ever used like just a camera on a phone, you'll be familiar with the UI style. I did a whole bunch of ISO tests with low light, and I'm not going to go too much into that. That could be its own video, the amount of information that is divulged there, and that will drag this video way down. So let's avoid that. Just know that these cameras are tiny sensors, and high ISOs start to really break apart the image. And then they'll also try to clean it up for you. They aggressively try to almost like smooth out some of the chromatic, like the luma noise. They're trying to smooth it out and give you something that looks more, I guess, normal. To me, that looks terrible. It looks bad. You kind of lose all the texture and detail of things. So I tend to avoid high ISOs. Both these guys, the GoPro I believe goes to like 6400 ISO, and the DJI goes to 3200. Both of those are way too high, in my opinion. I mean, if you're trying to get if you're going for that look, if you're going for the ghost hunting kind of low light, you're okay with it being a little noisy and dirty, that's great. For clean images, I tend to stick at 800. You can lock in both those ISOs in this camera and give it a cap, essentially, to say, yeah, go auto, but don't go above this. So let's wrap this up. I think in summary, most people who are looking at these two cameras are gonna be looking at the image. I don't even wanna say image quality, I just wanna say image because of what the GoPro is doing as far as like its grading functions. I think people will generally like that poppy, orangey, colorful look much more than the subdued DJI. I actually like the DJI's color, and I think that the more subdued look is more pleasing to what I am drawn towards and what I do. But I think all those little things that I mentioned about the DJI, all those little nitpicky things, I mean, they're not deal breakers, but the things that bug me about it, I think will be fixed in a future iteration, which is making me hold out on even buying a camera like the DJI Osmo Action. If you were to make me purchase one side by side, I would go with the GoPro. The design, the usability, the image, I think all of these things just make it a little bit better than where the Osmo Action is at right now. So let's circle all the way back around into why DJI sent us the Osmo Action and the GoPro Hero 8 to compare. Is it because DJI thinks that their camera is that much better than the GoPro? I don't think so. I think this is marketing money into letting people be aware that GoPro now has a serious competitor in the action camera market in the DJI Osmo Action. And I think that's something that GoPro should take rather seriously because this is DJI's first iteration of this camera and they nearly nailed it. So those are my thoughts on these two. Very long video. You guys will be happy with any of these cameras that you choose to buy. Again, I think GoPro is gonna be best for most people. We'll see you guys next time. If you have any other questions, throw them down below or shoot me a note on Twitter and I will do my best to answer. Until next time, I will see you guys all. Stay safe and stay inside. Good night.